versus the rest of the large players there. Everyone had these large models, but OpenAI was able to put it out because they could take on a little bit.
Hello and welcome everyone to the next episode of the A Media House podcast, Simulated Reality. Today we have with us the co-CEO of AltaML, Cory Janssen. Cory, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Hey, I'm excellent. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, great. Before we started the podcast, I was speaking with your team and you as well about some of the different approaches you have on AI in terms of your understanding of what AI is or what it should be as companies adopt it, right? Before we move into our subject, which we are going to talk about the evolution of businesses with regards to Gen AI, right? And how it is impacting. I want to really quickly touch base upon this view of AI that you and your company have, so that we can then kind of address the topic at hand accordingly.
Yeah, I think we've got a bit of a contrarian bet in terms of the space where a lot of the venture money has gone into, we see this repeatable pattern where there's a massive seed round or like some significant capital that comes in. The organization often doesn't get enough traction in terms of unique edge on data or understanding those workflows, and all of a sudden they kind of become a platform or try to pivot to that to try to save the investment. And the issue when you're selling AI into the enterprise in our take is it's a messy business. It's not the same as going out with a SaaS application where everything just works right off the bat. There's no good data sets. That will change over time as we're seeing more and more unique ways of getting data and kind of building on top of the right platforms. But, we think that the platform battle has been won by, the hyperscalers and Databricks and Snowflake. So we think that the opportunity is really building vertical applications, getting an edge around data and really deeply understanding the workflows of a specific industry, but not trying to compete against, the Microsofts and the Googles and the Amazons, but rather saying, hey, there's an underlying foundation here and we can build on top of that.
Okay, fantastic. And with that, now that we have set the context, right, we are going to talk about enabling business and evolution, right, through Gen AI. And can you tell me what business evolution means for you? Right, you've been in the industry for a while now. There are various definitions of business evolution, but what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I guess we try to cut through when we talk about digital transformation or business evolution. Often with our partners, we're trying to look beyond the buzzwords and really just saying, you know what, forget all this. You've got your strategy. Strategy's not new, or technology doesn't change strategy. You've got your strategy. How do you enable that with data? So even if you just, that might sound weird, but ban the word AI, it scares people. And in reality, when you talk about optimizing and improving business processes or reinventing business processes with data, it just so happens that we've got these really cool new building blocks that we might, call under the umbrella of machine learning that can be used. But it should be that we're using that technology and the data in service of the strategy and not the other way around. And so often I think we see this evolution or digital transformation almost being like, okay, I have to do an AI project. Well, no, you don't. What you need to do is you need to embark upon your strategy, but can, AI ML be used in that service rather than as a standalone piece?
I think that's a very interesting perspective and something that I've heard very often, right? You don't bring in AI for the sake of it. You have a business problem that if can be solved by AI or Gen AI, then you probably implement it. And this is something that I've heard most often, right? That is usually...
And that's a good point when it gets to Gen AI. Right now, I mean, the taping of this is in Q4 of 2023, and we're still in this peak hype cycle with Gen AI. It's good because it's creating conversations. I mean, if you're in my business, that's a positive. We need to always educate the business side that Gen AI actually isn't even a type of AI. I mean, you're still using the same underlying technologies, right? It's this overall term and talking about actually, you're still predictions under the hood. You're still using, the same underlying sort of technology, and it's being viewed in a different way, but it's not necessarily new. It's deep learning and RL analysis packaged in a different way, but it also isn't all of AI. And so most organizations, if they haven't started already yet, starting with the Gen AI project is probably the wrong path.
Okay, fair enough. And in that, in continuation to that, right? I'm sure Gen AI, as you rightly mentioned, is a conversational enabler for a lot of AI/ML services companies or product companies. What are some of the initial thoughts that you're seeing in terms of how, where are companies willing to evolve their business by implementing Gen AI? I'm sure there are a lot of companies coming to you and telling you that I want Gen AI in my company. And I have heard that a lot these days. How are you having these conversations, and where are you seeing the impact, the highest impact of, in terms of business evolution?
I think there's two sides. The first, which I sort of alluded to, is the saying, have that conversation around, yes, let's look at use cases that might have a Gen AI aspect to it, but understand that that's only a percentage, whether that's 5 or 10 or 20 or 50% of the use cases that are out there, depending on your industry. There's more out there, and you should use the simplest technical solution to get the job done. So there's always that conversation, but there's still, I think, a misunderstanding from the business side and the average executive in terms of how LLMs are built and the origin of hallucinations. And so the ability to when you explain to someone that most LLM out of the box does not understand ground truth, so you can explain it in layperson terms, like doesn't know if it's lying, that actually blows people away. They don't get it. Because everyone's tried working with the popular tools and tried with ChatGPT and had amazing results, say drafting an email or editing, and a bunch of these use cases there where a human is still in the loop and it gets 80 or 90% of the way there. When you look in industry, we only see use cases, or the vast majority of use cases we see are using an LLM on your private cloud, so in your own instance, tied to that source of truth, whether that's knowledge graph or some other, different other databases. So in that way, we're seeing, not trying to just use LLMs as synonymous with Gen AI, but in that way, really Gen AI or LLMs are just a fundamental building block for software development. If you think of it as part of that horizontal layer and saying, now you're exposed in all these other aspects of a solution, you've got this new tool in your tool belt, I think that changes the way you can think of solutions.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? In that context, I would also like to ask you, where do you see it currently plugging in, right? How does it impact the immediate stakeholders? Currently, there are a lot of human beings working on some of the tasks that LLMs and Gen AI are going to take it. But how does that impact stakeholders that are in the life cycle or supply chain of their entire business processes?
I like the mental model of taking any job and breaking it down into as many specific tasks as you can, and then understanding, is there a solution here that can, take out a significant percentage of time, or, often with a human still in the loop. Again, if you're, as you're embarking on this, there's a whole lot more to it in an industrial setting or in a real corporate setting than just the technical side of it. And so thinking of not replacing, first of all, getting rid of the fear and saying, we're not replacing a job, we're going to optimize all the tasks within a job. Like, I do not believe that AI will ever replace radiologists. I think I completely disagree with those who bring out that perspective. That doesn't mean that the tech can't get there. That doesn't mean that you have computer vision application that actually is as good as a human. But tell me, who's going to sign their name to the liability of making that cancer diagnosis? Are the regulatory bodies going to write themselves out of a job? There are aspects to this in terms of putting this into production that is more than just the tech, right? Yeah. So understanding those pieces and where that fits in most cases, it means a human is still going to be in the loop for the majority of use cases.
Correct. One of the things that you said is essentially you like to break tasks into as much granularity as possible and then address individual issues, while Gen AI specifically is not built on the premise of general intelligence as such, right? But it is always trying to move towards it, right? It is trying to move from being just something that did a simple task, right? Or what we call a short AI or small AI. And then there is the general AI. In that kind of journey of AI to kind of achieving that general AI, do you still think that Gen AI will continue to solve individual problems in businesses, or it will become, very imbibed into the entire business process idea of things, where, right from strategy to execution, Gen AI kind of plays a role in every part?
I don't think the current forms of Gen AI are going to get to AGI. I think, and many would talk about this, of whether deep learning can scale enough or whether you actually need to invent the entire system. So, I mean, the AGI question, I think, is we're so far from AGI. There's a whole debate, and you can have that over a beer in terms of where we are and whether it happens in our lifetime or whether that's 10 years away, or, some people say that we're so close to it. Let's put that aside and let the professors have that debate, right? It's above my pay grade there. What I see, though, is that there's still an application within, you've got, people are perceiving large language models, and again, I'm not trying to exclude, again, all the visual representations and the other forms of Gen AI or other co-pilots in there. But, for the most part, people are viewing Gen AI as some of the advances in chatbots, right? I don't think that you can, as you have these narrow use cases, and then you're looking at some of these applications, there's a big gap in there in terms of like the percentages of hallucinations and to be able to actually do everything really well. And so if you're going to actually have the reliability that you need in most business applications, you end up going from this really general solution to like something that is actually more narrow in scope. So I'll give you a few examples of this where we're actually putting this into practice. In the legal tech space, we're using Gen AI to interact with court cases and help lawyers draft documents in a way that takes out 90% of the work. We think that the legal industry is perhaps the biggest one that will be affected by Gen AI. Now, the way we're doing that, though, is we're tying that towards our source of truth, right? So you don't have these hallucinations. Like, there's a famous case of that lawyer in New York that was submitting cases to a judge that were completely fabricated, right? Again, it needs to be using that in the context of, you need to actually take the broad general model and apply that to that narrow scope. And I can give you a whole bunch of other examples. We've probably got half a dozen Gen AI projects on the go right now, but they all have that same common denominator. You still need to have a unique set of data, and you still need to have a deep understanding of the business workflows, even if you're using Gen AI, even if it's not different than other AI use cases in our experience.
Correct. Now that we have kind of summarized in a lot of sense as to what or where you think Gen AI will play a role, all right, or kind of what areas it will impact. How are you as a company who's trying to offer Gen AI services looking at problem statements? What are some of the defining parameters in business evolution that you're looking at when it comes to identifying good use cases and implementing them successfully in a way that enhances business people's lives rather than replaces it?
In the enterprise, we're seeing a ton of use cases around semantic search. Any Fortune 1000 company will have so many documents in the back end that you're seeing a number of use cases there. Again, some of them would be Gen AI, some of them would just be more, using LMs in different ways. Because we invest in early stage AI businesses, there's a few. I mentioned the legal tech space right now, which we're very excited about. Maybe a couple other examples that would demonstrate the ability to use Gen AI in terms of and to build intelligent agents from the sales process. I think that there's going to be many businesses created there. As you're looking at, we all kind of see these chatbots that pop up as you go to any e-commerce platform right now. And for the most part, they all suck and people hate them. We actually think that there's a way, if you understand and have deep domain knowledge about a specific industry, there's a way to actually build intelligent agents that people actually want to interact with. And so we've got a number of use cases there, a number of, especially one company in stealth mode as well that is in that space. A lot of time they come from use cases or industries that you might not otherwise know of unless you've been in that industry. So we've launched some early stage investments in one company that's actually using Gen AI to automate the reporting that engineers go through for utility companies. So if you think about a power line corridor, there's work that's been done in behind the scenes in terms of modeling, how those power lines change over time, vegetation overgrowth. There's a whole bunch of factors that come in. As you build together and look at that from a Gen AI perspective, there's actually like you're actually building out and tying to some industry specific software and how you'd actually model this out and build the visual representation, and then how you actually fast track and take out significant amount of costs in terms of what it would take to do that reporting. So that might not be something that you read about on, you know, a common use case that's out there. But again, it comes back to what's the business problem? This is just one element of the tool, and that solution will have Gen AI aspects to it, but it'll also have rules-based aspects, and it'll have just an overall software scaffolding that makes, you know, that you need for the application, and it will have elements that are many, you know, models that are Gen AI in nature. And so going to those kind of almost like blue collar, those almost more boring use cases, you're going to see more and more things like that happen that maybe aren't quite as sexy, but actually get to how work is actually done, and how, coming back to the point I made, you know, at the start of the interview, you know, really this is just another tool in the toolbox. When you think about that horizontal layer here, what Gen AI and LLMs have done is they've, you know, increased the, you know, the solutions that we have beyond just what was out of, you know, was there beforehand.
Yeah, you know, and considering some of the perspectives that I have heard, and your perspective is, I wouldn't say different. It is in sync with some of the things that I've heard before, right? But some of the things that you're saying, like you still believe that it's just a tool in a toolbox, right? But there are some people who believe that Gen AI has a bigger role to play. What do you think? How
I
does
just believe they're wrong. I just believe they're wrong, right? Like, I mean, so, and you can go and again, the profs are talked, you know, Jan LeCun has an amazing Twitter feed, and you can have, you know, he's probably most pragmatic about it, right? And so, you know, I would argue that it's you know, and we can debate again the whole coming of AGI and general intelligence here and trying to action, is there reasoning and back and forth on it. Like, it's, you still need to get over the hallucinations issue, right? And to get over the hallucinations issue, you still need to actually I haven't seen anybody do that out of the box in most industry applications. You still need to either fine tune models and or usually bring in, you know, other sources of truth.
Yeah, and then considering this view, what is your opinion on the job landscape in businesses, right? When we talked about business evolution, one of the major impacts on businesses evolving was the digitization of processes, right? But now it's intelligent automation. Not just that. In the context of what Gen AI is and what your opinion of Gen AI is, what we have discussed, how do you see the job landscape impacting in the coming future?
Those who use and build applications on this technology are going to thrive and disrupt those who aren't. So in the legal space, if, you know, the average lawyer makes $500,000 a year, $500,000 to $1 million a year in the United States, I think what you're going to see is a lot more lawyers that actually are compressed down, that it's, you know, the average partner isn't going to make 500, they're going to make 350. But you're going to see a whole bunch more that are making in the 7 figures. I think you're going to see massive increases in productivity for those who adopt and use these tools. But I also don't think it's going to be the end of any job. I think that we're going to see an increase in productivity. I mean, you know, like anytime you reduce the cost of a specific service or good, you know, usually, you know, you go up that demand curve, right? And there's more of it that's utilized. And so if you decrease the cost of medical tests, you're going to increase the number of tests that are done, right? And so, you know, we always talk about, oh, this time is different, right? The laws of economics don't apply. You know, Mark Andreessen, the one of the most famous VCs, has written very well on this. You know, I can't say it better than he does, but this whole idea that we're going to eliminate jobs or eliminate work. I heard the same things at the start of the internet, and it didn't happen. Right? I don't think it ever seems to happen throughout human history. What this does is it creates more opportunities for entrepreneurs than any other time. Like, there's no better time to be an entrepreneur, to start a business. There's no better time to be in that space. It's not great if you're, you know, maybe mid or end of career and it's difficult to learn and adapt these new technologies. But for those who are looking to build and those at the beginning of their career, it's actually more exciting than any other time.
Yeah, I think I've heard very differing opinions on this, but it's interesting to take your take on it as well. There are books which I have read, which talk about post-work economy, where probably there won't be enough jobs, so they need to find a meaning in life. But that's interesting, and I think that's a whole another debate.
And usually that comes from left-wing professors that have no experience from the real life, right? Like, I mean, when has it happened in any form of technology? Like, you know, you could have said this, it's this Malthusian argument as well, that like, it's this negative, and they say, oh, this time is different because it gets to thinking. No, I mean, I just, like, there's an optimistic side of this that I think you can take on if you side with the entrepreneur and the builder. And I will always be on that side versus the prof that sits in the ivory tower that talks about the destruction of society.
It's not just left-wing professors, to put it per se, but have you read Kai-Fu Lee's book on AI superpowers? Well, he likes to call himself an academic, but at the end, he's a businessman who's worked in both China and US, which is, you know, where most of AI is built. And then the last couple of chapters of his book address the idea of what happens if majority of the jobs are automated, and the entire idea of this Silicon Valley approach on minimum income or something. But I think that's a
well, and I live in Canada where there's doing tests on it, and I get that's again we'll leave the political side. I mean, it's been a while since I read Kai-Fu Lee's book there. I think my recollection, my takeaway from it was more about, you know, the difference in China and how they've succeeded in building amazing applications there, and that piece of it, and it was very powerful in terms of some of his ideas. But
I think
societal questions of like, hey, I'm just a dumb entrepreneur trying to move in this, right? I prefer to take the positive side of it, of like, I think that AI is going to save humanity, not destroy it. I think that the tools we build are what's going to cure cancer. Right. I think that there's like the healthcare systems around the world are going to collapse if we don't make decisions in a better way. Right. I don't think we solve climate change if we don't use technology and have these tools. So when you look at, you know, what we need to accomplish as a world in health and in climate, like AI is the solution here. So I'm going to be making bets along those lines. Right. And hey, if I'm right, if I'm wrong in the world's end, well, the world's anyway. I'm gonna live my life in a positive way, betting on entrepreneurs, betting on people that want to create and who believe that this is a new technology that actually transforms us for the better.
For sure. And with that comes some of the challenges which I want to discuss, right? And I would love to kind of have a coffee and, you know, continue. I would love to have this conversation, you know, again. But just coming back slightly on track, right? And you do believe that AI will be the innovation that can solve some of the major problems that we have. In the context of Gen AI and businesses, which is the problem, which is the topic of discussion, right? What are some of the challenges that you're seeing right now? Hallucinations is one. I mean, the technical problems I definitely understand, and probably you can highlight them again. But what are some of the other challenges that we are seeing to kind of effectively implement Gen AI to sustainably scale its implementation and its use cases across businesses, large businesses?
I still think the adoption problem that you have in AI and the trust issues they exist in Gen AI, just like in any other ML project, but perhaps are more pronounced. So, you know, if you're building an ML model to make a prediction on a loan default, your output and how you test that, there's just that one number. You come up with a percentage, and here's your prediction. And it's more about explainability. You know, at least you have a better sense of the explainability. The fact that it's so difficult in Gen AI to get to any sense of explainability makes it very difficult to test and validate. And so for most organizations to feel comfort putting that into production, it's a heavy lift. So I think you're going to see that much more from the startups. You need to be very careful about the type of use cases or the areas that you select when working with an enterprise because of the risk adverse nature of it. And because of I'd say the opportunity cost, but like there's a real risk from a reputational perspective if something really bad comes out, which I think you can argue. I mean, when you look at OpenAI versus the rest of the large players there, everyone had these large models, but OpenAI was able to put it out because, you know, they could take on a little bit more risk in terms of like dealing with not just the edge cases, but the times when it wasn't as accurate. So the adoption issues, I think, are substantial. I still think there's a scaling issue from a cost perspective. And I'm not just talking about training models. It's not, it is a material cost when you look at how you implement Gen AI, and again, Gen AI LLMs within an organization. So obviously there's the big vendors that everybody knows. I mean, even if you're using, say, like a Llama and something like that and putting it on your own private cloud, it's not a small number in terms of like the horsepower that you need to actually run this, you know, run these models. And so getting over that as you're building applications, I think that's an engineering problem. It will be solved, but this is what we're seeing in practice, right? It's the adoption, the trust factors, as well as the costs, or the increase in cost that you see from running these type of models.
Okay, and considering some of the challenges, right? What is your message as we come to the end of this conversation? What is your message to some of the business leaders that you're catering to, right? In terms of what they can expect in the coming 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, right? Down the line. And are there some things that you would like to mention in their approach, how they should address it, the entire Gen AI problem?
Sure. I'd say the most important thing is mindset, and stop thinking about it as a Gen AI problem. Yes, this is the bright, shiny object today, but understand that AI/ML as a broader suite of technology, right? This is one very important point, and one that's captured the imagination of the world, frankly. But think of this as the internet back in the mid-90s. Like we've now had our Netscape moment. We've for the first time seen what's potentially possible in this field. And so the most important thing is to be able to allocate some budget to move in to understand how to use this data, use this new technology in service of your strategy. And that involves, being intentional, making a number of bets in the space. And so starting working on projects and diving in and building this as part of the DNA of your organization is going to pay off over the next few years. But you need to think of it in the context of that portfolio of bets, right? Take on a number of use cases and really understand how each project, regardless of whether it succeeds or fails, helps to improve the AI literacy within your organization.
Is there a framework that you have for putting these bets? Is there some parameters, 1 or 2 parameters that you would like to you like to kind of advise on or consult on when somebody comes with this? Is there a framework you have?
We certainly have our own these tools that we work with our partners. I'd say probably I'd point to Emerge is an amazing resource that's out there that has published the most in the space. Dan Fagella is the founder of that site and is probably the top leader in the industry in terms of So rather than try to rehash everything we do in a much larger context in 30 seconds, I would maybe refer your listeners to his site, and where he's put out a ton of content on this and frameworks for almost every situation. He'd probably be the best one that I would recommend people go to. But yeah, this is what we do every day, and so this is what we'd sit down and really work with the team on. There's a lot of complexity here. After seeing a few hundred use cases, it's not rocket science, but there's lots of pitfalls for sure.
Okay. On that note, thank you so much, Cory. It was a very interesting and a candid conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope you had fun too.
Thanks for your time.